Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel we're going to talk about one of the greatest bands that came out of the post-punk era. I'm talking about Swindon's greatest, XTC. First time I ever heard XTC was around 1979, I think around the summer or the fall, I can't remember, but I was listening to my parents' stereo in their living room, listening to K-Rock, and on came this song that absolutely just blew me away. The song was called Making Plans for Nigel. That drum sound, those hooks, the melody, I just, from then on, I had to get everything from XTC. The next day I ran out to Moby Disc Records, bought the import single, later on brought the Drums and Wires album, and from then on, just buying pretty much each XTC album as they came out. So today, we are going to rank all 13 studio albums in the XTC canon, including the one they did under the moniker Dukes of Stratosphere, because that's an important part of their discography. Pretty much kind of paved the way forward for them, future albums. So everybody has their own kind of take on XTC. Some people like their more later orchestral stuff. Some people like their more post-punk stuff. But I like it all. I like it all. There's certain albums I like obviously better than others. And let's get to it. Let's not waste any time. I'm going to start off here with number 13, their final album, Wasp Star from 2000. For me, it feels like they've kind of run out of gas at this point. Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding are the last standing members of the band. Dave Gregory exited the band on the previous album, Apple Venus. There are a few choice songs on here for me, for my liking. I like Playground and Stupidly Happy. There's also another track on here called You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful. Those are great tracks, but the rest of it just doesn't really register with me. And I probably listened to it maybe a half a dozen times. It never really struck me as anything fantastic that's up there with their greatest. So anyway, number 13 for me is Wasp Star, released in 2000, their final album. Coming in at number 12 is the album from 1984. This is where I kind of lost a little interest in XTC. I never really liked this album too much. For me, it's too overproduced. There's too much clanging and clanking, and part of the problem is those drums just drive me crazy. I hate that humongous drum sound they're using on here. There's too much instrumentation going on. It's hard to concentrate on what the hell is happening in some of these songs, especially on the first half. Now, the second half does have a few tracks I really dig. It was kind of odd that they put All You Pretty Girls as the single. It does not sound like a single to me at all. To me, if there was a single on this album, it would be the song You're the Wish You Are I Had. That is a classic XTC catchy tune, which should have had way more attention when promoting the album. Other great songs on here. There's a really cool guitar part on here. I'm assuming it's played by Dave Gregory, called I Bought Myself a Lyrebird. Really cool opening guitar track. Another great one on here called I Remember the Sun. But overall, another XTC album that's just never really registered with me personally, and that's why it's on the near the bottom of the list for me. 1984's The Big Express, coming in at number 12. Coming in at number 11 is the second XTC album, Go To. This features the keyboards they had. Barry Andrews. Never really liked that keyboard sound. I like the way it sounds on the first album. I think the first album, White Music, has way more in terms of like better songs, better songwriting. This is kind of low on good songs. There are a few on here I really dig though. There's one called Battery Brides, which they would later cover live in 1980, and I'll get to that down the road in this video. Great version of that. I like Mechanic Dancing. There's a few other ones like B-Town, My Weapon, but overall, not one of my faves here. And this is coming in at a number, what is it coming? I can't even see with this lighting. Coming in at number 11 on my least two favorite XTC albums. Coming in at number 10 is Apple Venus from 1999. A lot of people love this record. I don't know. There are some great tracks on here. I like I'd Like That. I like Nights in Shining Karma. I like Your Dictionary. But I don't know, a little too orchestrated for me, a little too orchestral XTC for me, and kind of a snooze fest. But that's just me. And maybe I need to listen to it more. It's one of those albums, like by the period between Non Such and this was about 7 years. So I was listening to a lot of other new music at that point. So by the time this came out, it didn't really strike me hard like a lot of other previous XTC albums did. But not a bad album, and a lot of people consider this one of their favorites. Even this book, 1001 Albums Before You Die, actually put this in as one of those albums, which is amazing that they would put this in before, like, you know, Black Sea or some of their other greats. But anyway, coming in at number 10 is Apple Venus from 1999. This is the last album with Dave Gregory on guitar. He would leave after this. There were some disputes and arguments with Andy Partridge. Coming in at number 9 is their first album, White Music. This is a really cool debut from XTC. Very post-punk. They're not trying to be punk. They're trying to be something different. It's more quirky pop guitar music. A lot of great little singles on here. We've got This Is Pop, one of their great early tracks. Atom Age is a great track. Statue of Liberty, another great one. Really funny track on here by Colin Moulding called X-Wires. He's like spitting out all these words really fast. A friend of mine and I used to listen to this and just crack up over that one. One of the most bizarre versions ever of All Along the Watchtower by Hendrix. Just hysterical with harmonica and just this weird beat. Other tracks, Set Myself on Fire, Unbugged, really, really cool. Not a 5-star effort here, but a great debut from XTC, showing they were definitely different than what was going on at the time. Very intelligent, very complex, very original. XTC White Music coming in at number 9 for me. Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of the XTC catalog. This is an album that I think if they had just dropped a few songs and maybe added some of the bonus cuts, it would have been nearly a 5-star album. I love about 65% of this album. I think some of the pastoral, slower songs don't mix with the darker songs, but I think this album, Mummer here, has some of their greatest tracks that they've ever recorded. Some of Andy Partridge's best ballads. Love on a Farm Boy's Wages is just classic. Wonderland by Colin Moulding, gorgeous track. By the way, this is the album where they became a studio band going forward. Terry Chambers is no longer playing with them. I think he's playing on a couple of tracks. He left after they stopped touring, but did contribute a few tracks on here. I'm not sure which ones, but we have really dark songs like Human Alchemy on here. Deliver Us from the Elements. It just kind of rub wrong with me with the rest of the album. Lady Bird is another just beautiful track from Partridge. In Loving Memory of a Name, Me and the Wind, Funk Papa Roll. There's maybe about three or four songs on here I don't really care for, but I think this is a really good step forward. Mummer from 1983 coming in at number 8. All right, so these next two albums for me, if they had just done a little editing, you know, maybe and maybe cut down the indulgences a little bit, these albums would probably be near the top for me. But there's just too many songs, too many indulgences, too much sparring with the listener. Okay, the first one here is number 7 on my list. It's Non-Such from 1992. There's 17 tracks on here. This is a double album. Some people can pull off the double album thing. I don't think XTC really can. There's too many, there's too much indulgences going on in this album. Great songs mixed with just songs that are just subpar, in my opinion. Some of the greatest songs of their career are on this album, in my opinion, though. Then She Appeared, buried deep within the album, is one of the most amazing pop songs XTC ever came up with. I mean, just, it's like something Lennon and McCartney would have come up. It's that good. That Wave, another just stellar track with an amazing guitar solo by Dave Gregory. Omnibus is another amazing track. Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead is another great track. That was the single off the album, I believe. That was the one that I remember getting a lot of airplay back in the day. But there's a lot of stuff here that's just, it's just filler, in my opinion. The Ugly Underneath, Bungalow, War Dance, I don't know. Some of these tracks just do not fit in, and I think this would have been a great 10 or 12 song album. They had just knocked off a few songs. I remember before Skylarking came out, and I heard that Todd Rundgren was going to be producing the album. He said that they do have a tendency to spar with the listener, and I have to agree with that. I totally have to agree with that. some editing was needed. Somebody needed to step in and do a little editing on these albums. I mean, because there's so many great songs, but these albums as a cohesive listening statement for me have always been kind of jarring, especially when you have such great songs rubbing against kind of subpar material. But anyway, that's just me. Great album here, Nonsuch from 1992, coming in at number 7. I feel the same way about number 6 on my list, Oranges and Lemons from 1989. So many amazing songs on here with you know, some just tangents and songs that just don't really belong on here. Over the years, these kind of double albums from XTC, I've made my own mixes where I can listen to a cohesive statement about 10 or 12 songs in a row from my liking, and it's like fantastic. And you can do that with a lot of these XTC albums. For me, some of their outtakes, some of the songs that were on the Ragbone and Buffet album are even better than some of the songs that they actually included on their albums. But we'll get to that album later on. Anyway, Oranges and Lemons. Incredible songs on here. Starts off Garden of Earthly Delights. Great track. The Mayor of Simpleton and King for a Day are some of their best singles they ever released. There are tracks in here I just never liked. Here Comes President Kill Again. Never liked that. Poor Skeleton Steps Out. Across the Ant Heap, which to me is just complete indulgence. It's just so much going on in the track. It's just spastic and over the top. Then you've got like 3 or 4 songs that end the album that are just superb. You have Hold Me My Daddy, fantastic. Pink Thing, silly but fun. And then you've got Miniature Sun, which is incredible. And then it ends with Chalk Hills and Children, which is like an outtake from Pet Sounds. It sounds like a cross between Pet Sounds and Brian Auger and the Oblivion Express is a Better Land. This kind of really incredible atmospheric, incredible combination. I think it's one of their most beautiful tracks. Chalk Hills and Children, but I've made my own like 10 or 12 song version of this album that I listen to all the time. I weed out all the filler. But anyway, a great album nevertheless with some of their most amazing songs. Oranges and Lemons coming in at number 6. All right, we're down to the top 5 here. And so between Big Express and Skylarking, XTC took on the moniker of the Dukes of Stratosphere. They were trying to mimic or kind of produce an album that was kind of like 1967 psychedelia, and boy, did they do it well. They first put out an EP with 6 songs in 1985 called 25 O'Clock. 2 years later, in 87, they put out another Dukes album, but it was a full-length album called Sonic Sunspot. I'm including both of the albums here in one setting. This is an album they released a while back called Chips from the Chocolate Fireball. It has 25 O'Clock and Sonic Sunspot all in one CD. Makes for a great listening experience. There's 16 tracks on here. Of course, there's references to, you know, psychedelic Beatles, Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett era. You've got Hollies on here. When I first heard the song Vanishing Girl on K-Rock around 87, I thought it was the Hollies. I'm like, what is this song doing on K-Rock? Had no idea it was XTC. Learned it was, of course, it was the Dukes of Stratosphere, but I had no idea it was XTC, and it blew me away. And the song 25 O'Clock, Bike Ride to the Moon, My Life Explodes. This is such an incredible, fun listening experience. Highly recommend this. For me, this is a top 5 XTC record. You could tell that they're having a lot of fun. The songs are just killer from start to finish. Fantastic stuff. Dukes of Stratosphere. Chips from the Chocolate Fireball, coming in at number 5 for me on my list. Coming in at number 4 is one of the great post-punk classic albums of all time, Drums and Wires, the first album they did with Dave Gregory. When they got Dave Gregory in the band, it completely transformed the whole sound of XTC. Gone were those cheesy keyboards from Barry Andrews. In came this completely just brilliant guitarist, Dave Gregory, who could play just about any style and manageable. Of course, it starts off with Making Plans for Nigel. Just what this is by the way, this is the UK version. There were many different versions of this album. US version started with Life. Life Begins at the Hop. That's what the US version starts with. This is the UK version with Making Plans for Nigel starting it off. Just a barrage of peppy, poppy, quirky post-punk songs. Helicopter, When You're Near Me, I Have Difficulty. Snipping, Sipping goes to Scissor Man. Fantastic track. Outside World, Reel by Reel. 10 feet tall. It's just a classic post-punk pop album. Ends with one of the most darkest, demented tracks Andy Partridge has ever written, called Complicated Game. Starts off really slow, builds up to the point where he sounds like he needs a straitjacket. It's fantastic. Number 4 on my list of XTC albums. I love, by the way, I gotta just pay homage for a second. I love this period of XTC, probably the best because they were a real band. They had 4 amazing musicians in this band. Plus they had, they had Andy Partridge, main songwriter, guitarist. He could play a mean guitar as well. Dave Gregory is lead guitarist. You had Colin Moulding, one of the best pop bass players of all time. And then Cherry Chambers. My God, such an underrated drummer. That 4-piece band, unbelievable. So XTC, Drums and Wires, coming in at number 4 for me. After the Big Express, I kind of lost interest in XTC for a short while. Once I heard the Dukes of Stratosphere, I was like, this is really cool. When I heard this album, this is like being born again for me with XTC. I just could not believe how incredible this album is. This is a pop masterpiece. I'd give this album an absolute 5-star. I'd say any of these 3 albums right here could be number 1 for me, these top 3. But for today, this one is number 3, and it's Skylarking, produced by Todd Rundgren. I don't think they ever produced a better sounding album from start to finish. Every song is a winner. Todd Rundgren did an amazing producing job on this. Dave Gregory's guitar, the harmonies, the songs, oh my God, where do you start? Summer's Cauldron starts it off. Incredible. The way it goes into Grass. And then The Meeting Place. Colin Moulding just shines all over this album with Grass, The Meeting Place, Big Day, Sacrificial Bonfire. Some of Andy Partridge's greatest pop songs of all time. Ballad for a Rainy Day. Earn Enough for Us, a classic power pop song. That song that ends side 1, Season Cycle, sounds like something that maybe Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle era they could have written. It's just incredible. The whole album is amazing. I like the version here, though, with Mermaid Smiled before they took it off and put Dear God on there. Nothing against the song Dear God, but I love Mermaid Smiled. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this I think it's 2016 remix of Skylarking on CD. This is a real revelation here. Just comes out of the speaker, just so incredible. Highly recommend this. It includes both Dear God and Mermaid Smiled in the track listing. Also has a DVD Blu-ray of all these Andy Partridge demos from around this period. Fantastic, just fantastic. Highly recommended. Released on Andy Partridge's Ape label, which all the XTC albums now are under. So Skylarking to me is an absolute pop masterpiece. My favorite album from 1986. That's coming in at number 3. Now, number 2 is probably my most listened to XTC album, my go-to XTC album, and that is English Settlement. I love this record. This is a great step forward for XTC. But again, some of the songs on here, I prefer more of a single version of this album. Let me tell you here. I like the first. I'm using the CD version here. Which has both albums. I love everything up to number 7. I love the first 7 songs on this album so much. Probably my favorite 7 songs in a row from any XTC album. Runaways, Ball and Chain, Census Working Overtime, Jason and the Argonauts, No Thugs in Our House, Yacht Dance, and All of a Sudden It's Too Late. Perfect right there. But the second half of the album, it's really hit and miss for me. So I made a 10-song version of this album that I listen to all the time. And after All of a Sudden It's Too Late, I add the tracks. There's an outtake from this album called Blame the Weather. I put that in my mix. Great song by Colin Moulding. And then I add English Roundabout and Snowman. And that for me is my 10-song perfect version of English Settlement. I know some people love the whole album, but there's some tracks in here I just never cared for. Like Melt the Guns. I never liked Knuckle Down or Fly on the Wall or Down in the Cockpit or It's Nearly Africa. I think it would have been a 5-star one-album release, but that's just my opinion. English Settlement, my go-to album for XTC. This is the one I listen to the most these days. An absolute incredible album. Highly recommended. Coming in at number 2 for me. And speaking of English Settlement, there were 4 songs released on this Beeswax album back in 1982 that should have been on English Settlement. The songs, of course, along with the one I just mentioned, Blame the Weather. There's one called Tissue Tigers. Another one called, what is it called here? Punch and Judy, and Heaven is Paved with Broken Glass. Those 4 should have been on English Settlement, in my opinion, instead of some of the others. Number 1 for me, though, I had to be honest with myself. I don't listen to this album as much as I used to, but this is the album that made me a huge XTC fan, and I listened to this album to death in the 1980s, along with other friends of mine. We thought this album was just the greatest, and for number 1 for me is going to be Black Sea from 1980. To me, this is XTC at their best as a 4-piece band: bass, drums, vocals, 2 guitars, bass, and drums. Just kicking ass all the way through. But the last track I never liked, Travels in Yellin'. Never liked that track. I never thought it fit on this album. This is the one without the green cover. I never thought it fit, but the rest of the album just flows along incredible. What can you say? An album that starts with Respectable Street, Generals and Majors, Living Through Another Cuba, Love at First Sight is such a great Colin Moulding song. No Language in Our Lungs, that whole first side is absolute perfection. Towers of London on side 2, Paper and Iron, and on until the last track. Incredible album. And while we're talking about Black Sea, have you ever seen the movie Erg, A Music War? There's a clip of them doing Respectable Street in France, supporting the police. You've got to see this movie. It's fantastic. It's just all clips of bands playing in 1980. As you can see, there's the Cramps on here, Gang of Four. There's a great version of X at the Santa Monica Civic in 1980, doing an incredible version of Beyond and Back from Wild Gift. And while we're speaking of live albums from XTC, this is an absolute must right here. This was recorded at the final leg of their European tour in 1980, promoting Black Sea. They would keep promoting Black Sea into 1981, but this is the last show of that tour in December 22nd, 1980, I think at the Hammersmith Odeon, I believe. And this is the BBC recording here, BBC One live in concert. Has most of the entire concert on here, and it shows XTC to be just this absolute machine. They were an incredible live band. I wish I had seen them. I wanted to see them at the Hollywood Palladium in 1982, supporting English Settlement. It was sold out and then later canceled because of the stage fright from Andy Partridge. But if you ever want to hear XTC at their absolute live best, this is the one right here. XTC live in concert, BBC One live in concert. There are a few songs missing. There's about 4 songs missing from the original broadcast. I believe Reel by Reel, Outside World, and a few others, Statue of Liberty, I believe. But this has the most of the songs. There's about 15 tracks on here, and highly recommend it. It's just one great track after another. Life Begins at the Hop, Burning with Optimism's Flames, Life at First Sight, Respectable Street, No Language in Our Lungs, This Is Pop, Scissor Man, Towers of London, the most incredible live version of Battery Brides from Go 2, Living Through Another Cuba, Generals and Majors, Making Plans for Nigel, and ending with Are You Receiving Me? Highly recommended. Another great one from BBC Sessions is this one called Transistor Blast. There's 4 CDs in here, 3 of them which are the entire XTC, pretty much their whole career with BBC Sessions, from everything from the White Music album all the way up to Nonsuch. The 4th disc has this particular version in it, has this entire concert in it. So if you pick this up, you get that BBC one I was just talking about. Transistor Blast from XTC, nice 4 CD box set. And then last but not least, there's a couple more things. If you're looking for a good odds and sods compilation, Rag and Bone Buffet, which came out in 1990, is fantastic. Some of these songs should have been on their albums. There's a song on here called The World is Full of Angry Young Men by Colin Moulding. Should have been on Mummer, but they took it off. Plus, those 4 songs I mentioned that were outtakes from English Settlement are on here, and a lot of other goodies. Highly recommended if you're a diehard. And then last but not least, a box set called Coat of Many Cupboards. This has their whole career on here up through Nonsuch. A lot of demos, great demos of Senses Working Overtime. other demos of like Wonderland, a killer live version of Paper and Iron from Black Sea. So anyway, if you're a diehard, you must have this as well. So I'm going over the 24 minutes here, which isn't really my thing. It's a long listen. But anyway, everyone, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And list your favorite XTC albums in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching. If you dig the content, press subscribe. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.